What a truly mesmerizing piece of art that was historically handed down from the Native American ancestors. It says that its purpose is to protect people from nightmares. It absorbs them during the night and discharges them during the day. As an over-the-road truck driver, I have traveled to so many places in the United States. Among these places, as a way for me to stay sane and not succumb to boredom, I try to find as many interesting places that are accessible as I can and that don't exist in my home state. Gift shops, restaurants, casinos, you name it. As long as it's truck accessible, I will find a way to visit the establishment, as long as it is in the same route of my travel. Most of my routine is usually southern states, to avoid the mountains and the harsh winter weather conditions. It still happens from time to time, but not as terrifying as the northern winter. Along the southern states' routes, one of the most common establishments that I've always noticed without fail is Native American gift shops. It's everywhere in the I-40 that stretches from Oklahoma to Arizona, advertised for selling accessories, household decorations, snacks, knives, boots, clothing, etc. One of the household decorations most commonly sold is their authentic dream catchers. I have visited many gift shops, sometimes not to buy, but only to refresh my physical and mental state after driving for hours. It was quite invigorating. Most of the workers do not mind people window shopping anyway, so it's not a big deal for one to enter just to walk around and browse. Also, I prefer to think that they enjoy company, or seeing new faces once in a while. This afternoon, as I drove along the same interstate towards the west, I noticed a quite interesting advertisement on the billboard. Native American gift shop. Trucks welcome. Next exit. The reason I find it interesting is all billboard gift shop advertisements that I've seen so far usually have the exit number on it. This one doesn't. It just says next exit, and it doesn't mention what they have in store. Regardless, I'm a sucker for interesting and eye-catching billboards, so I decided to take my break there. Now, here's another interesting situation that caught my eyes. The next exit that I've noticed, it has no number on it. It just says exits with a single road towards it. It also does not have a bridge that connects the opposite highway. It means that this exit is only meant for a west interstate, not the east. That doesn't bother me too much, as my thoughts are already too focused on my break. As I enter the exit road, it's connected to two roads, one to exit back to the highway, and one road to the right to the gift shop that's about half a mile away. As I drove the half-a-mile road, I saw nothing else around the area, just deserted land. At the end of the road, there's the gift shop, just the gift shop, and nothing else. It was a dead-end road as well. I parked my truck and proceeded to enter the shop. The store clerk greeted me with a smile as she proceeded to price tag merchandise. Inside, it was quite small, only about 6 aisles with 5 racks and shelves in each aisle. I didn't really plan to purchase anything until I saw an aisle full of dream catchers. It was quite colorful as it was organized according to the color of the rainbow. The pattern of the net is also mesmerizing, as it was different from one set to another. The size also varies with different charms as well, ranging from beads to feathers to other things. Then, one particular dream catcher caught my attention. It was pure black, from the hook down to the circle to the net as well as the charm. All of the other net strings are brightly colored, but this one has pure black string. Not only that, the net pattern is also quite unusual. It was not among the patterns I have noticed before. This one was different, almost familiar looking, like I saw the pattern before, but couldn't figure it out. The charms are made of one very thick black feather and one black bead. The feather looks almost new, very healthy. The bead is not shiny at all, just pitch black, like a rock. I touched the black dream catcher, and as soon as I did, a sudden gust of wind suddenly burst into the store. It went past me and disappeared. It was weird, but I didn't think too much of it, thinking someone must have opened the door and let the wind come in. I grabbed a normal blue dream catcher, paid, and left. As soon as I got into my truck, I opened the bag, pulled the blue dream catcher to hang it in my truck, only to find that I was holding the pitch black dream catcher. There's nothing else inside the plastic bag. Also, the pattern is slightly different from the one I saw inside the store. I thought that they must have given me the wrong merchandise, so I got out of my truck to go back, only to find the gift shop had vanished. There's nothing around the area, just me, my truck, with a road that's going to the exit. Terrified, I hopped back into my truck very quickly and drove off the area as fast as I could. The feeling of eeriness is an understatement. Half a mile later, I saw the exit turn on the right, and I floored it. As soon as I drove off the exit and back into the highway, the exit road had also vanished, revealing only the interstate highway with no exit. I thought that it was just a bad dream, since I pulled over to the shoulder of the highway and took a short nap once in a while, so it's a possible factor. I breathe a sigh of relief and continue driving until I'm running out of hours and rest. As soon as I parked to rest for the day, I noticed a small plastic bag on the floor of my truck. I grabbed it and revealed the content. It was the pitch black dream catcher. Again, the pattern is different. I screamed, got out of the truck, and threw away the dream catcher, along with the bag, into the nearby trash can. I thought that it was the end of it, but it was just the beginning of my nightmare. As soon as I'm back inside my truck, I saw the black dream catcher in the middle of my windshield, hanging from the roof of my truck. The pattern had changed again. I just stood at the door, frozen in fear, unable to do anything or grasp whatever was happening for at least 1 minute. How did the dream catcher make it back inside my truck? Who hanged it? What does the pattern mean? Fearing for my life, I get in and lock both doors before I prepare myself to go to sleep. That night, I was still having a strange dream. So strange that I thought it was real. I was on a field surrounded by heavy fog. Then, in my vision, I saw 2 figures facing each other. One is wearing a hooded shawl and a long coat with feathers. One is pitch black, with a white teeth grin and holding a scythe. They just stood there, motionless, facing each other. I swear I thought that I was dreaming for centuries, since they're not moving at all. Then I woke up. The moment I woke up, it was the next day, and I felt that my truck was cold. I do have the habit of turning on the AC when sleeping, so I thought that that might be the reason. I walked to the front of the cabin, only to notice that the black dream catcher had changed yet again. The net had changed yet again into a more sinister-looking pattern. The feather started to look a little frazzled, and this time, there were 2 rocks hanging on the charm. I checked the doors, both still locked, with no sign of breaking and entering. The AC was off. The temperature outside was around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. The chill inside my truck started to not make sense at all. Despite the current situation, I still have a duty to perform, and can't think about it all day. As I was getting ready to start driving, the chill in my truck started to disappear slowly. Nothing else in the truck struck me as odd. As I was driving, I started to feel a little drowsy. Now, this was bizarre. I just started an hour ago. Feeling sleepy does not make sense at all when I was resting for 8 hours last night. I tried many things to distract my tiredness, consuming snacks, taking a drink, listening to music, but nothing got rid of my drowsiness. Giving up, I pulled over to the next rest area and tried to take a nap for 15 minutes. I set my alarm and proceeded to take a snooze. Right before I completely fell asleep, I felt the temperature inside the truck start to drop again. Not too drastically, but enough for me to feel the difference. Regardless, I fell asleep and entered a dream state. It was the exact dream I had yesterday. The same two figures, the same positions. However, this time I saw a difference. The scythe that the dark figure was holding was trickling with blood, dripping down into the foggy ground. The figure with the shawl was holding his stomach, breathing heavily. I think he was injured. I couldn't do anything in the dream. I couldn't move or speak. All I could do was observe. Then, a terrifying aura came rushing down my spine. The dark figure slowly rotated its head and came looking directly into my eyes. It was smiling from ear to ear. It had a pair of horns that I hadn't noticed before. It raised its right arm, pointed its finger towards me, and said something I couldn't decipher. Then, I woke up back into reality by the sound of my alarm. As soon as I was back to reality, I was having a hard time breathing. The air was very cold and heavy. Every breath I took hurt my nostril. I checked the doors. Both were still locked. Still having a hard time breathing, I mustered up the courage to look at the dreamcatcher. The net had changed again, and it was a shape I could finally figure out. It was a pentagram. The feather started to lose some of its ruffles. It looked like a feather that had been handled roughly by the hand of a little child. The other charm gained yet another rock. I started to research the meaning of black dream catchers with feathers and rocks as the charms, and I came across one particularly interesting article. It was about 5 years ago when this article was written. It even had pictures with the exact same charm. The net pattern was different, but for some reason I could tell that this was the same dream catcher. The article said, "There are many dream catchers being made and sold across the United States with various styles and colors. It was quite a novelty for every household to have the feeling of peace and quiet inside their home. However, one color that they must be very careful of is the black-colored dream catcher. Rumor says that black dream catchers are a symbol of death and evil. For one to create black dream catchers, one must have a strong reason to entrap not just a nightmare, but an entity that causes the nightmare. If a black dream catcher was made without such reason, it will instead entrap the soul of the nearby individual over time. Some call it spirit catchers. To entrap an entity is easier and takes shorter time than absorbing a soul from a living human being. Once an entity has been captured, it will mark itself with 2 charms, a perfect black feather and a single rock. The feather symbolizes the Native American spirit that prevents what's inside from coming out. The rock symbolizes the strength of whatever is inside. Warning: once the charm appears on the spirit catcher, it must not get in touch with a live human. If it does, it will act as a leech. The entity inside it will start to gain strength from consuming the sanity of the human that touches the spirit catcher. Every time the human host falls asleep, the entity will consume the sanity and gain a rock. The entity will also try to curse the human host to fall asleep as much as possible. The spirit catcher cannot be thrown away, as it will always find its way back to its host in perfect condition. To destroy the spirit catcher is also impossible and dangerous, as it will come back to its host with vengeance and malice. Also, never let the rock reach 5, as this is when the entity is at its strongest. Once it reaches 5, there is a greater potential that the entity will be able to break free from the spirit catcher and trade places with the human host's soul. The string on the net is a distraction. It will change the pattern to mimic your sanity level. Do not get too frazzled by it, or it will make you lose your sanity faster. If you happen to touch it, here's a way to break the connection. The human host must find any sacred Indian burial ground, bury any precious metal such as gold or silver, put the spirit catcher on top of the burial site, and offer your blood as a sacrifice to the center of the net. The last step, the blood sacrifice, must be done on a full moon by midnight. If done correctly, you will see the spirits of the ancestors start to rise up from the site and enter the spirit catcher. When it is a success, you will see the feather turn back to normal, and the rock will go back to 1. If it is not done correctly, do not dig the site back to retrieve your precious metal, as this will anger the spirits of the ancestors instead. After the connection is broken, do not touch the spirit catcher again. Leave it on the site and walk away, turning your back against it. The article ended right there. I looked at the spirit catcher. It had 3 rocks on the charm now. That meant I'm halfway there to get my soul consumed by the entity. The pattern on the net does not change. Gathering what's left of my mental strength, I started to research a nearby sacred Indian burial ground. It was not easy at all, since the internet is trying to conceal and protect the sites from being found and chance to be desecrated. However, after a few minutes of thorough research, I found one, right before I started feeling sleepy again. Fighting the drowsiness, I put the location on the GPS, revealing that the site is only 1 hour away from my location. However, there is a problem. It was still 2 p.m., which means that I have to fight off the urge to fall asleep for at least 10 hours. Luckily, according to the Weather Channel, tonight happens to be a full moon. Pumped up with adrenaline, I disconnected my trailer at the rest area from the bobtail and drove to park close to the site. To combat drowsiness, I got out of the truck and walked around. I did some light exercise, I talked to strangers, and looked at the site. What I saw at the site, however, terrified me to the bone. 7 hours remaining. There were hundreds of spirit catchers lying everywhere on site. This meant that to get into the site, I had to be extremely careful not to step on any spirit catchers. Otherwise, I would put myself into a state of curse even more. I had to think of it as a minefield. Also, the aura emanating from the site was quite eerie. It made sense, since there are hundreds of trapped entities in the site, probably in a state of anger, trying to get out with little strength they have, fighting the Native American spirits inside it. 6 hours remaining. I turned my back from the site to walk back towards my truck when I saw something odd going on. There was ice frost everywhere on the corner of each window and windshield. It was growing slowly, looking like it was going to break if I tapped on the window. As I got closer and closer to about 30 feet from the truck, I felt the temperature begin to drop. There was no one around my truck, so there was no one that experienced what I did. I was in such fear that I'm contemplating whether to go back to my truck or stay away from it. However, I realized that I needed to grab my knife to perform the sacrifice tonight, so staying away from it wasn't an option. But before that, I took a walk again to burn time. 5 hours and 30 minutes remaining. I touched the door of my truck. It was so cold that I swear I thought I got frostbite just by touching the door. As I swung it open, the temperature started to rise again. I looked at the spirit catcher. Nothing changed, which is odd. I figured that since I'm going to be parting ways with this cursed novelty, I grabbed it from my windshield and took it with me to walk around some more to distract myself from sleeping. I took my folding knife and went on to burn more time. 3 hours remaining. By this time, it was quite dark, and I started to see less and less people wandering around. Feeling unsafe, I tried to call someone, having conversations with them, making me feel like I'm not alone. However, it was cut short, since the signal around this part of the town was quite terrible. As I turned on a particular street I hadn't walked on yet, I saw a small shadow on the next street junction. It was coming towards me from the corner. For some reason, I had a bad feeling towards the incoming figure, and the air started to get chilly again. 2 hours remaining. The shadow finally revealed itself in front of me on the next block, holding a scythe, brandishing 2 horns, grinning from ear to ear. It was the exact same shadow I saw in my nightmare. Suddenly, something pulled my arm and snapped me out of my trance. It was the figure I saw with a shawl and a long cape with feathers. I looked downward. He was bleeding from his abdomen. Writhing in pain, he told me to wake up and perform the ritual, as it was getting closer to midnight. The dark figure caught up to us and slashed the man in front of me. Then, almost immediately, it swung its scythe at me. As soon as it made contact, I snapped back into reality. Turns out, I fell asleep in front of the sacred Indian burial ground. I looked at the spirit catcher. The net, broken. The feather was no longer there. And now, it had 4 rocks. I looked at my watch. 11:55 p.m. I had to perform this ritual now. As I entered the site, the aura was getting more and more foul with each step I took. I had to walk very slowly and find empty areas to avoid stepping on other spirit catchers. The time is now 11:58. As I knelt on top of an empty site, I looked at the moon. It was very round and very bright, with no sight of clouds around it. No time to lose. I started to dig with my hands. As soon as I began, the spirit catcher started to wriggle in my pocket. Ignoring it, I continued until I dug enough depth for my gold necklace to go inside. This time, I heard whispers and muffled screaming, telling me to not do it. Again, ignoring all distractions, I patched the hole back and put the spirit catcher on top of it, still wriggling, but unable to go anywhere. I looked at my watch. 12 a.m. It is time. I proceeded to slit the palm of my hand with my pocket knife, wincing in pain. As I poured my blood into the middle of the spirit catcher, I felt a warm, light gust of wind surrounding me, feeling peaceful. As the wind started to disappear, I saw an apparition in front of me. Braided long hair, 2 large feathers sticking out of his head, fully clothed, with a bow and arrow behind his back. I have a feeling that he was the ancestor mentioned in the article. He was smiling. It seemed that he was thankful for my sacrifice. Then, in an instant, he moved like a flash of light into my spirit catcher, and it immediately stopped moving. I stayed for a little bit, observing the spirit catcher. The net had been fixed. The feather came back perfectly, and 3 of the rocks had vanished, bringing it back to 1. Breathing with a sigh of relief, I turned my back on it, retracing my steps, being careful not to step on another spirit catcher. As soon as I was out of the burial site, I turned back and bowed down as a sign of gratitude. As soon as I got back up, I saw the same figure that was inside the spirit catcher, looking healthy, with no wounds, smiling, and waving goodbye at me. I waved goodbye at him as well, and watched him disappear slowly into the night. I got back inside my truck and had a good night's sleep. This time, no more nightmares. So, dear reader, learn from my mistake. Whenever you visit a Native American gift shop, do be careful to not touch anything that you find interesting. Leave them alone, especially if you stumble upon a pitch-black dream catcher with a feather and a rock as the charm. Turn your back from it and walk away. Do not give them any chances to break free from their prison. They are there for a reason, and you do not want to find out why. Sometimes, ignorance is bliss.